Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
It must have been hard to tell the difference between the screeching of the tires and the screaming of the torture victims, the backfiring of the Ferraris and Mercedes, souped-up racing cars, and the volleys of shots being fired at the people whose country was being burned up by the hotshots of Formula One.
There was blood on the tracks, but no one in the industry or the media, which advertises it so well, spoke about it. The truth about Bahrain is this: a tiny, corrupt and absolute monarchy dictatorship is massacring and torturing the democracy protesters who represent the overwhelming majority of the people of Bahrain.
And the dictatorship is being armed, trained and financed by the British and American governments and their client satrapies in the Gulf. Here at least we look on the other side of the tracks, the side being deliberately concealed behind the advertising hoardings. And joining us for a few laps of the truth is Sayed Ahmed, a Bahrain democracy activist here in London. Sayed, thanks for coming on the Sputnik. It must have been painful for you to watch them frolicking in Formula One, having a whale of a time, when you knew what was going on just a few hundred meters from the track. Tell us about how that felt.
Thank you for inviting me on this show. I mean, in 2012, I was there in Bahrain and I witnessed all of that, the Formula One race, how people on one side cheering up, enjoying the race. And at the same time, on that weekend, there was a man was shot by the police, by the right police. He was killed, his body was found, his family was not allowed to see him for really few hours. And then the country was in two sides, one side, and the vast majority of the people were attending a funeral of someone who was killed by the right police, burying his body to the graveyard. So that was the real scene.
Formula One did cancel the Grand Prix when the revolution in Bahrain began, but they have since reinstated it. What's the feeling of the people about the economic benefit that the Grand Prix brings in? Several $100 million, they say.
Well, the reality is there is no really much benefit to the people. I mean, you couldn't really talk about the race while there is instability in the country. I mean, everyone would love to see the race if the country is stable. Everyone would really enjoy. In 2004, many people used to go to the Formula One and enjoy the race. However, to see such a crackdown on those people, and I mean, you talk about someone who was killed during the weekend of that race, and there is no justice to him. Last year, his killer was acquitted. And in 2013, two ladies were arrested at the Formula One circuit itself, Nafisa and Rihan al-Musawi. They've been charged with terrorist act. Right now they are serving 5 years imprisonment. Rihanna was talking about how she was severely tortured. They basically stripped her clothes, sexually abused her. She talked about severe kind of torture that no one would really imagine. Where is she now? She remains in the jail, and the Formula One do not really care much about her safety or how about justice for the family of Salah Abbas. He left up 5 kids, and that's the reality. So where is the business? The business for the Bahrainis is the struggle, where they go every day on the street, where they will be subject to collective punishment by the right police. The amount of tear gas.
Well, we know what I don't understand, because Bahrain is so tiny. It's perhaps the size of Croydon, yeah? With a population of 1.3, of which more than 500,000 are actually non-nationals, yeah? These are workers.
Expats, yeah.
So how do you, in such a tiny place, have the race? And so that means you have to have a lot of police keeping all the protesters away from it, yeah? To keep the race clean, make it look okay.
Yeah, I mean, in that term, Bahrain, during the Formula One, will turn up to be and declare martial state, you will see checkpoints in every single entry and exit of all villages.
This dictatorship is, as Gayatri said in the introduction, tiny, totally dictatorial, foreign, was established there by the British, and is now bringing in expats to guard it from the anger of the people. How's that going to work?
The royal family, they would never trust in the Bahraini people. Therefore, they believe in bringing expats, naturalizing, changing the demography of the country, which is a serious concern. In a country where its population do not exceed 500,000, these are the native people, and they try to rebalance in order to tell the world that, oh, everything is stable, we got expats, we got... I mean, they want to make a different, how to say it? I mean, if you talk about a country where the number of journalists being arrested are only 3, but considering the size of this country, by CPJ, Committee to Protect Journalists, it has been rated the 2nd country in the world arresting journalists. If you talk about if in a single protest in Bahrain, you will see 300,000 protesting on the street. What does that tell you?
Oh, it tells you that at least 3/5 of the people
of
Bahrain want rid of this dictatorship. And yet the British and American governments, the American Fifth Fleet is there in Bahrain. The British are supplying police chiefs, dubious export if ever I saw one, armaments, training and so on. In fact, you were laughing at the website today of the British Foreign Office.
Well, it said, the first line of the report said that 2013 saw positive developments in Bahrain for human rights. How can you start a report like that?
But it went on to say, and we are giving them assistance in weapons, arms, training, and so on.
It's even going beyond that. I mean, on the 27th of March, Baron Swarsi had just answered one of the questions at the parliament about the torture allegations in Bahrain, and her reply was, FCO has not received any evidence of torture to extract confessions. To get a country like Bahrain, where the torture being documented on a daily basis, and it's been reported by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, you wouldn't see a week without a statement by those NGOs to talk about how horrific the torture is. I mean, people begin to talk about details of being electrocuted. I've been a victim of torture in Bahrain myself, and I know the reality, what it means to be inside those cells, to be in in Bahrain, the central prison, for example, Joe, you will see full expats. You will see the guards, those which will lock your cell, they don't speak your own language. Many of them are from Pakistan, from various countries, and it's that sad. And talk to Nabil Rajab, for example, who is serving 2 years.
And they're even locking up doctors, surgeons who are trying to help the protesters.
I mean, there was a case of 51 doctors, which many of them got 15 years sentenced
15 years in prison for treating the wounds of the victims.
And right now there is, and right now there is Dr. Al Akri. Right now he is serving 5 years imprisonment. And you talk about Ad-Dimistani, who is another nurse who lost his son because of the unrest in the country, and then they took the father, and right now he is serving 3 years imprisonment.
What torture did you suffer?
I mean, you could look at the scar on my face. This is due to the beatings by the police when they attacked the Pearl roundabout on 17th of February. I mean, it was a matter of, I was about to die on that day. The wounds all over my body. Probably this is the clearest sign. But then, because I spoke to different news channels about me as a victim and as a witness of what has happened on that night. And then I got myself arrested and been sentenced in military court for a year. Obviously, the kind of torture, imagine when you're being slapped in the face. Your ordinary reaction is to put your hand to protect yourself. These guys were fighting your own instincts, that if you raise your hand to protect yourself, it means you will get more slaps, fighting you with your own body, that, okay, we are going to slap you, but we don't want to see any reaction from you. It's the kind of torture where you get blindfolded most of the time, get spat in the face, humiliated, insulted, they will insult your family, your sect, it's all this kind of things. But what is mostly hurting is that when you get that person who is insulting you, he is not from your country, he is an expat, coming to your own country and judging and questioning your loyalty to the country.
Wow. I have been talking about torture in Bahrain for more than 25 years in the British Parliament.
Yeah.
And so for Baroness Varsi to now say there is no evidence of torture in Bahrain, when at least a quarter of a century ago and until now, I have been placing in front of the British Parliament evidence of electrocution, of torture of every kind, of murder, kidnapping, disappearance, is really, frankly, very difficult to bear. How long is it going to last?
Last February we celebrated the 3rd anniversary of the revolution. If you look at the size of the people who are still going on the streets and fighting for the very same cause, if you look at peaceful protesters or human rights activists such as Nabil Rajab, who is behind bars, still give calls to people outside to tell them that this jail means nothing to him. If he comes out, he will be the same Nabil Rajab everyone knows. To see those people, when they left the prison and being through this extreme torture, they come outside and next day they will join the street. What does that tell you? At the same time, those people are facing the Saudi intervention. We have Saudi troops on our soil. We have the British advisors there. We have the Americans, which again, I mean, looking at a country where its army being naturalized, you talk about foreign troops existing in the country, and all of that, and people are still fighting and still struggling. I think
with that spirit, you will prevail. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Coming up after the break is the Conservative Party high flyer who'd cut a dash behind the wheel of a Ferrari himself, Tory MP Zac Goldsmith. Welcome back to the Sputnik. Now, all that glisters is not gold, as Shakespeare told us, but Zac Goldsmith is a diamond in the rough of a Conservative Party mired in one or two local difficulties with some of its MPs. You'd never catch my next guest pretending his first home was in Basingstoke. Indeed, I can hardly imagine him filling an expenses form at all.
He's more likely to be found with a stiff broom sweeping out the mess that has become Westminster, with new and revolutionary proposals to transform Britain's stagnant duck pond of a democracy where MPs are told what to say and what to do, even if they don't believe it. 5 years after the great expense scandal, they're still claiming off the taxpayers to keep their horses warm in the stables during the cold winter.
David Cameron said this week that we had a, quote, good and honest parliament, unquote. But not many people see it that way. In any case, Zac Goldsmith's come up with a plan whereby the public can deal with errant MPs in a way that American citizens already can and do, namely by exercising the right of recall. And I'm glad to say Zac Goldsmith MP joins us now. Zac, you are one of the MPs that David Cameron was referring to, both honest and hard-working. But as I say, not many people see it that way. We've seldom been in lower public esteem.
Yeah, and you can look at the data, people pulling away from political parties, you can look at voter turnout, or you can just look at the anecdotal stuff, turn on the radio, listen to people on LBC or any other program hurling abuse at politicians. And what shocks me and depresses me is that there is an appalling level of complacency in Parliament about this, as if it's a phase. And you and I know that this hasn't come about because of expenses. All that happened in the expenses scandal is that it authenticated a prejudice that people already felt in relation to politics. But that feeling has been growing for years.
The Maria Miller case has just brought everyone back to 5 years ago, to the Daily Telegraph story, which erupted volcanically over the British political system. Many parliamentarians thought that that ash had been brushed away. But it's all back again, isn't it?
It's back again, and I think it'll keep on coming back, because if you rely on Parliament to police itself, you're always going to have these problems. So you've got a choice. You either allow Parliament to police itself, that's discredited. You create a new quango, experts, to decide whether or not you and I are playing by the rules. I wouldn't trust that system. I think particularly for independent-minded MPs like yourself, we could say like myself as well, I think that would be a dangerous scenario. Or you can trust the voter. Those are the three choices. And unfortunately, there is a sense of terror when it comes to any prospect of actually empowering voters. There's a fear of democracy there. Ironic, given that we're all there for democratic reasons.
Indeed, the voter is the only one that can be trusted in this picture. I've been before the Double Standards and Privileges Committee, staffed by some of the same people who cleared Ms. Miller, and they raked absolutely partial and politicized injustice against me. And so I know that I wouldn't put my trust in them.
But you would put your trust in your voters.
In the voter.
That's what
I mean,
democracy is all about.
This is an idea whose time has come.
Do you know,
now, you've been pioneering it. It's not you didn't invent it. It already exists in America. But you've been pioneering it here, and I really think this is a moment for you.
It is a really simple thing. And by the way, it was promised by all three mainstream parties in the heat of the last expensive scandal. They said, OK, the solution is we'll bring in a recall system. After the election, that appetite for reform evaporated. And eventually there was a sense that they had to come up with something, otherwise it would look like a promise broken. And they developed something called it was a draft recall bill. Now, I don't know whether you've read that bill. I have read that bill. It is the opposite of recall. Instead of empowering voters, it empowers the same parliamentary committee that ruled on you, the same parliamentary committee that was discredited in recent days over Maria Miller, and they decide whether or not an MP qualifies for recall. And once they've made that decision, an MP is toast. You can't survive the next few steps. You're finished. Now, as far as I'm concerned, recall is a pure and simple democratic thing. You allow people, if enough of them agree, if enough of them sign a petition, they earn the right to have a referendum. Do they want George Galloway to stay or go? And if the majority want you to go, you go. And there's a by-election. It's pure, unarguable democracy.
It's perfectly possible to consult the people. You wouldn't even have to have ballot boxes on a wet Thursday in every school as to whether Zac Goldsmith should stay or go. It could be done by electronic means and very quickly.
Quickly and cheaply. And the key is that there should be no criteria. I mean, I've had this argument, I had arguments earlier today with politicians, and it all comes back to a sort of fear of democracy. What about if you take an unpopular view and you're thrown out? Well, my answer to that is it's democracy. You know, what about if people had been recalled over the Iraq War? Great, we wouldn't have had the Iraq War. Every single argument against recall comes back to that same basic fear of democracy. And if you look around the world where recall exists, there is not a single example anyone has been able to give me, not one, of a successful, vexatious campaign. So there have been recalls, but none which are widely accepted as having been unfair. You can trust voters. They're capable of making a good judgment. By the way, I had an argument a month ago with an MP. It was the only debate I've had with an MP against recall. No one else admits that they don't approve of recall. And he, on principle, opposed recall. He said, it's a representative democracy. You send us there, you let us do our job. He's changed his view now because he became embroiled in a controversy, and he realized that you cannot trust the social media, you can't trust the mainstream media, you can't trust the newspapers, you can trust constituents. He got a fair hearing at home. He was vindicated in the end. He was cleared of all charges. He was innocent, and his constituents knew that long before the newspapers backed off. His view on recall has completely changed, because ultimately, if you can't trust your constituents, let's not bother with any elections. Let's do away with democracy.
Just to play the devil's advocate a bit, when you say there's no requirements, does it mean the public, the constituents can any time, without any reason, just call on this? You
would need to have a relatively high threshold, otherwise you get party shenanigans. So you don't want to make it possible for the opposition party to just endlessly trigger referendums. But if you have a sort of 20%, that's about average around the world, 20% is a lot. In my case, it would mean about 14,000 people signing a petition saying we want an opportunity to vote on whether or not to get rid of that. Now, if 14,000 people signed that petition, I would not be able to dismiss that as the game of the opposition party in my area. I wouldn't be able to put it down to you know, the unions or some campaign group. I'd have to accept that there was a serious problem, and I'd want the opportunity then to ensure that I had a clean and proper mandate.
Because you could then stand in the subsequent by-election.
You could stand again,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, you could be vindicated that way.
And ideally, you would simply win the referendum, because once you get to 20%, you then have a referendum.
Yeah.
And it's a simple thing. Do you want him to stay or go? And if more than half in a by-election said they wanted me to go, I think I'd probably accept that I was in the wrong job and I'd go. But you're right. You would have the opportunity to stand again if you felt that there was an opportunity for you.
And of course, it wouldn't mean that that one was wrong, even if one lost. If one was forced into a referendum because one took a stand on this issue or that issue, people didn't like it, but you really believed it. If you lost, there would be no shame in losing, and later you would be vindicated. Charles James Fox, the greatest of all the British parliamentarians, was thrice expelled from the British Parliament, but carried back by the people and remembered in a golden light in history when those who expelled him are long forgotten.
That's the thing. If you are challenged on principle, people respect you for that. And I think in any case, it's very rare that an MP would lose the confidence of his or her constituents on an issue of principle. I think you might lose the arguments, but people at least respect you for being honest and declaring your view in a clear and direct manner. Where people will fall foul of this with recall is if they behave badly, if they don't bother turning up to Parliament. You know, the rules at the moment allow you or I, we could go on holiday now until the next election. We could go and hang out together in Barbados on a beach for a year. We wouldn't have broken a single rule. We could not go to Parliament. We could decide to boycott our constituents, refuse to engage with them. We could switch parties. We could do any of these things without any opportunity for our constituents to challenge that. It's an absurd situation. Recall would keep people on their toes at all times. And there's a really fundamental reason why I think that's important. As you know, we have a situation now where Parliament is not doing its job. It's not holding government to account. Most MPs, when they vote, they don't even know what they're voting on. There have been times when I haven't followed a debate. I've rushed to the door. I've asked the whips, what is it? What's the issue? What's this amendment? And they haven't been able to tell me. I've hovered and asked other MPs, what is this amendment? And the most they'll do is say, this way. That's the way. That's where you should go. And I have abstained on votes for that reason. But I can tell you that if you were to stand in central lobby and ask the first 20 MPs to emerge from a vote on a technical amendment, what have you just voted on? Almost all of them will simply shrug their shoulders. And for me, that's a bigger scandal than the expenses scandal.
Indeed it is, much bigger. We have a parliament of, as I described it once, poodles with pagers. They don't have pagers anymore. They don't need them. They bark when they're told to bark, bite when they're told to bite. They are Pavlov's very dogs. And that's the real crisis of British parliamentary democracy, that Tweedledee, Tweedledum, two cheeks of the same backside, or three cheeks if you throw in the Liberal Democrats. People who believe in things like you do and like I do are very rare birds. We're called loners and
Mavericks.
we're not mavericks. We're not team players. But I never saw politics as some kind of team game where the MPs are the crowd cheering on their team.
I agree. I mean, our job, there's no job description for an MP, but if there was, it would simply say, hold government to account on behalf of your constituents. You can't do that if you have a voluntary lobotomy the moment you enter Parliament. If you're going to do everything you're told, if your vote can be taken for granted by your party at any given moment, then you cannot hold the government to account. They'll take your vote for granted. You become what they refer to as lobby fodder. If you're not willing to use that one tool, the only thing you and I have that other people watching this programme don't have is the ability to vote in Parliament. And if you're not willing to use that vote strategically, you might as well be replaced by a laptop computer.
So what can we do, Zac? Are you going to introduce this bill of yours for genuine recall?
The bill ebbs and flows. There are times I think I'm going to win, there are times I think I'm going to lose. I think the Maria Miller case, there's a silver lining to it. I think it's put this issue right back on the agenda. I think that now there's an acceptance by the Prime Minister and even Nick Clegg that the Standards Committee has been completely discredited. You can't have that middleman body to decide whether or not the voters have the right to hold their MP to account. I think that's now accepted. What I hope we don't get is some absurd recall that says you can only be recalled if you've got a custodial sentence, if you go to jail. It's got to be down to the discretion of the voter. That's my campaign now. I think we've got a window of about a month to win those arguments, and your help with that is already invaluable.
Let me know if I can help you. Well, if the Double Standards and Privileges Committee goes down, at least its chairman got a knighthood out of it. Well, as Zac said, the Maria Miller case has definitely been a cloud over the Parliament this last few days, but it does have a silver lining. it does return this whole issue centre stage. And as Zac said, we ought to listen to the people. Gayatri, red gloves and all, and red shoes, was out there doing just that.
Yeah, I think she's right to resign. She can't continue to, you know, the normal everyday person can't get away with that kind of thing, so why should she? And she's done the right thing. She's stepping down. The public uproar is not going to cease until she does. So, yeah, I think she's done the right thing.
They get paid enough, really, so why should they be claiming expenses?
Well, yeah, she should have resigned earlier because her apology was so bad, and it kind of, you know, makes David Cameron look like a bit of an idiot because he is supporting someone who the rest of his party isn't supporting.
Yeah, of course it's wrong. You know, if I fiddled my expenses, I'd lose my job.
If it was anyone else in normal circumstances, they would be punished for it.
I'm a true blue. I will not be voting blue Conservative in the European or next year.
Lib Dem or UKIP then?
No. Lib Dem, no. Even worse. The whole three. I don't trust anybody anymore.
Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for.
Keep in touch with us, though, on Twitter at @RT_Sputnik, and on Facebook you can like us on Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.